Hello, everybody. I'm meteorologist Hutch Johnson. Today, we're going to talk about our risk of severe storms on Thursday. That'll be June the 27th as we go through the late morning, afternoon, and even evening hours. Now, all modes of severe weather are possible. We're going to go over the timing, the track, where the ingredients are coming together to form different types of severe weather, right? We're talking huge hail potential. I mean, monster-size hail, upwards of 3 inches in diameter. We could have some wind gusts that reach 80 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour. And indeed, there could be some tornadic activity, and one or two of those tornadoes could be strong. We're going to go over the timing, the track, and also the risks. All of that coming up right now. But first, if you're new to watching Hutch's Weather, I'm a meteorologist who has 27 years of on-air experience, up to nearly 20 years of classroom teaching meteorology to college students, as well as some work on the research side of things early on in my career. It's wonderful to have you here. If you like what you're watching, I'd appreciate you hitting the like button. Hey, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And as always, ask a question. I'd be happy to try to answer that as well. And if you're so inclined, hit the subscribe button. Let's get started with a look at the forecast first and foremost. And we're going to look at a couple of models on Hutch's Weather here today as we take you through with regards to the storms. Now, first thing we're going to do is we're going to zoom into the northern plains and the area of concern. So bear with me while I get this thing popped in to the northern plains. Now, you're looking at an hourly updated model, and this forecast model here, as we roll it through into Thursday's time frame here, we're going to see some morning showers and convection that move off to the east. Gusty south winds begin transporting hot and humid air up into the northern plains. Low pressure that is developing and strengthening. As low pressure systems develop and strengthen, they can add some extra lift to the atmosphere. But not only that, with the heat and humidity that these south winds will be bringing up into the northern plains and the high plains of Montana and even Wyoming, we'll have a risk for some strong to severe weather. Now, as we time this out, you're looking at about the midday hour here, early afternoon. Low pressure continues to work its way in and develop. Look at the isobars getting close together. That increases the south flow. That south flow of moisture will fuel these storms once they get started. Now, this model has really things going with the wave moving off of the Rockies as we go into the early afternoon to mid-afternoon time frame. These showers and storms moving into eastern North Dakota are not expected to be the main event. The severe event really begins as we cross into around the time frame of 3 to 5 p.m. Then check these out. Moving out into the oil patch of North Dakota and centering in on the Black Hills of South Dakota and rolling out of Montana. All modes of severe weather will be possible as we go through this time frame. You subtract 5 hours from the time in Europe here, 0Z, that's midnight in Greenwich, Europe. Subtract 5 from that, that's 1900 hours is a 7 p.m. So high dinner time and just after in the mountains and high plains, the high terrain, I should say, of Montana. Moving in toward the Missouri River Valley, Bismarck, Pierre, South Dakota, as we cross into the 10 o'clock time frame, and you see the backwards C shape, this indicates to me that we could be seeing more of a wind event as we go into that 10 o'clock time frame. Then that continues its trek eastward. This is the James River Valley and the Cheyenne River Valley of North Dakota. And those could be windy thunderstorms, but notice the intensity of those future radar echoes don't appear to be as strong heading into daybreak hours, moving into Minnesota. And these storms are kaput, the air mass out there a lot less with regards to prone for severe weather. That's a look at the track and timing. Most models agree on that. For North Dakota, South Dakota, the risk is going to generally be in the dinner hour, evening hours till 10 o'clock at night. In Montana, it's a little earlier than that. Let's look at another model. Why do we do that? Let me explain meteorologically speaking. These models are giving us scenarios, and honestly, there isn't one model that you can look at, and I'm saying this with 20 years of experience plus, going on 30 years of dealing with the computer forecast models. Not one of them will lock into thunderstorm forecasting and be consistently accurate with where 1 or 2 storms form, what time they form, where they form, what direction they move. No models can do that, but we can look at a consensus and get a better idea. Now, this is a look at a North American model. Let's get into the time frame of your Thursday. Morning showers, more making their way into the central and eastern part of the Dakotas. Low pressure developing in the Black Hills and the high country of Montana. Here comes the main event as we cross into the late afternoon and early evening, rolling off of the Beartooth Pass in southern Montana and crossing into, well, the Devil's Tower area and Rapid City area. These storms could be severe, any of them. These, not so much. Now, as we head into the afternoon hours, look at this model, really rocking storms in and around, say, Sidney, Montana, out towards Williston, North Dakota, and way out there on the Highway 2 corridor in the far north. Those push into Manitoba, storms in South Dakota. Spotty in nature, and the more spotty they are, then the better chance we will have at seeing more energy contributing to the individual cells that form, and that increases the risk for very gusty straight line winds and even tornadoes. This is as we approach the 10 o'clock hour right here. Storms are moving in on Bismarck, Pierce, South Dakota, Nebraska's Panhandle. They look to be strong there as well. These storms will race backwards. C-shape would indicate a bowing structure, gusty straight line wind potential with those storms as they roll through. And by the time they get into the Red River Valley, subtract 5 from that number, you're looking at 3, 4 in the morning, and they really fall apart. They fadizzle. They really, fadizzle. It's a meteorological term. Chapter 19. Well, maybe 29. At any rate, storms are out of here. The threat is over. One more model, just for fun, because watching and looking at models is fun. This is a WRF model at NSSL. It's a convective allowing model. Let's get to the time frame in question, and let's rock a look at this one. Showers early day and afternoon moving into the Red River Valley and eastern South Dakota. Main event here, oil patch of Montana, Sidney, Montana, Wolf Point, Montana, out towards Williston, North Dakota, and Dickinson, North Dakota, and Medora out there. Strong storms lining up. Chance of severe working its way through as we go through the dinner hour, and here's 10 o'clock beyond. They really start losing energy as they move into the central Dakotas. Another round in store, but the main event will have taken place. The one that you see following the event is more or less a weather wiggle, I like to call it. A little support from the upper levels of the atmosphere driving those storms. All that said, all models agree on the timeline. Montana, late afternoon. North Dakota, South Dakota, those storms even into parts of Nebraska blossom as we go into the dinner hour and beyond, and really through 10 to maybe midnight. After that, it looks like the risk rapidly diminishes. Now, with regards to the risks involved, I want to take a moment to look at some parameters, and we're going to start with a look at the tornado parameter. This is called a significant tornado parameter, and it looks at things in the atmosphere like wind shear at different layers, where there's upward vertical motion to take that wind shear or rolling tube of air and bend it toward the ground, so we get these vortexes that are aimed toward the ground. So we have to have all of the ingredients: humid air, rapidly rising air, and some spin in the atmosphere. Where is all the ingredients, and where do they highlight as we go into your Thursday? Look at this. Heading into Thursday afternoon, we see that this parameter, the tornado parameter here, starts to rise as we get into the midday hour. It really rises in the high plains. This is here the Badlands of South Dakota between, say, Rapid City and Wall, South Dakota. This is the western reaches of the oil patch in North Dakota. Look at that. A brief blossom of thunderstorm risk as we go into the 23 minus 5. That's 18 to 6 p.m. dinner hour, right on the border and working its way through. Look at the intense amount of energy in the atmosphere and spin in the atmosphere in parts of central South Dakota and central Nebraska as we cross toward the 10 o'clock time frame, and then the tornado risk is kaput. Now, let's take a look at the lift in the atmosphere. The more lift in the atmosphere, the faster the air is rising, the bigger the hailstones that can be supported. One of the parameters we look at is potential energy for fast rising air. So let's see where we have the greatest amount of surface-based fast rising air. And we'll take a look at this as we go into the afternoon on Thursday. So advance the time here to the midday hours where you see the orange colors. This is a considerable amount of rising motion and potential for rising motion right along the border at the same time as we saw the tornado potential near the Montana border. And look at all of the upward vertical motion in South Dakota. So you're looking at the I-90 corridor through South Dakota, through Rapid City, and points south into, say, Valentine, Nebraska, north central Nebraska. That's where we'll have the potential for some really huge hail. Then the upward vertical motion in the air starts to decrease as we cross into the 10 o'clock hour, and it's shot. So this does look like it's not going to be an all-nighter by all of the models and all of the pointers that we're seeing here. Now, this forecast is something that I will update in real time, and you can count on me to cover my home turf up here in the Northern Plains as these storms develop and move through as we go through our day on Thursday. But for now, here is a quick peek at what the Storm Prediction Center has for guidelines with regards to storm risk. Number one, the levels of severe weather that the Storm Prediction Center issues is on a 5-level scale. Marginal, meaning storms may or may not become severe. And if we do, it'll likely just be a few storms reach severe level. Slight risk in yellow is a few more storms, maybe even scattered to numerous storms forming, and the chance of severe goes up. The risk of severe is greater, a little larger hail potential, a little larger wind potential, and oftentimes tornadoes cannot be ruled out, but they're usually not the violent type of tornadoes that are expected on a slight risk day. In an area of enhanced risk, we could start to see some stronger tornadoes, very large hail, severe hail, and damaging winds that could be very excessive as well. And on the course of any given year, the Storm Prediction Center rarely, if ever, issues a high risk category area. Sometimes it's less than one time per year. Other times we have a more active year, and it can happen a couple of times, but it's not something that you see frequently. With that said, here is a look at the Storm Prediction Center's outlook for your day on Thursday. I'll put the timer up there so you can see the time. We're looking at this on our Wednesday evening. This is the level 3 of the 5-level scale. Right here, it's called an enhanced risk. It extends through not Bismarck, but Williston and Dickinson, the oil patch of North Dakota, Montana. Williston, Glendive, Montana, the I-94 corridor out towards Miles City, Montana. Now, all of western South Dakota, including the Black Hills, all the way to near the state capital in Pierre, South Dakota, and much of western parts of Nebraska in this enhanced area of severe weather. That is an area where we have all modes of severe weather possible as we go through the afternoon and into the early evening hours before things really start to quiet down just a pinch. And if you want to take a look at some of the expectations, here's a graphic I put together for that. Number one, for Thursday, tomorrow, the risk of enhanced storms, hail upwards of 3 inches in diameter, mainly down here, the way I was seeing the latest model runs, gusts to 80 miles per hour. Any of those Boeing line segments that are from these towering storms have a risk of straight line winds that could be very damaging. So batten down the hatches, tie down the lawn furniture, make sure it's secure. And the trampolines, just so it don't end up in the eastern part of the state, you may want to tie that puppy down or turn it upside down as well. A few tornadoes will be possible, and dare I say 1 or 2 could be strong. So we'll keep our eyes on that. Minot to Bismarck to Pierre in the yellow area, that's that slight risk. We have scattered to numerous severe thunderstorms potentially in these areas, but this will be on the decreasing intensity side. By the time these storms get into the eastern third of North Dakota, really the eastern half, the risk of severe goes way down, but we could still have a few storms. A couple storms flirt with severe criteria. In the big sky country of Montana out near Billings, we do have a slight risk for the storms as they fire and roll off of the high country not far from Red Lodge, Montana. That's a look at the Storm Prediction Center's risks. Now we're going to go back to the Storm Prediction Center and take a look at the areas that they've got identified for different types of severe weather. We looked over the computer models ourselves. We talked about it. Now let's see what the Storm Prediction Center has to say about day 2 tornado risk. Here is an area of concern for tornado risk. The brown area. What does that mean? That is a 5% risk that within about 30 miles of any point, there could be a tornado. There will not be tornadoes up and down this area. It's a 5% risk. That is Not too high when we look at the number 5%, but it's significantly much higher than the climatological average for this date in this area, which is about 0.2% or 0.05% in some areas of this area coverage. So there is an enhanced risk of some tornadoes in this area of the eastern Dakotas. I do think there's more spin and shear as we looked at the latest model runs down here into Nebraska. The Storm Prediction Center will have an update. What's the green area? That's a 2% risk. That includes Bismarck and Pierre and Billings, Montana. Some more populated city centers, including Rapid City in that 5% area. Other risks, how about the dangerous straight line wind potential with these storms? Let's look at that as we close this out. This red area and the hatched area. This hatched area is a significant risk for severe winds. Where you see the reds, there is a 30% risk of damaging straight line winds. That's a very high. So any storms that form, wind damage will likely be the number one concern in these areas where you see it, the hatched or the red circle. The area in yellow is a 15% risk area as we go through the day on your Thursday. This extends all the way down for that damaging wind risk all the way into Kansas. So keep that in mind should storms form down in the high plains of Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and into western Kansas. Now let's take a peek at the risk for hail, large hail. And let's see what the Storm Prediction Center has highlighted at this early stage heading into the nighttime hours here on our Wednesday night. There is a hatched area for an enhanced risk of large hail. And I said upwards of 3 inches in diameter in the hatched area here. These storms should have a lot of upward vertical velocity to support a lot of large hail. There will be upper air support with diverging winds over the area. That kind of helps to cause the surface air to rise even faster once it gets going. So this area, Williston, Dickinson, Medora, Glendive, Montana, Miles City, Montana, Billings, Montana, all of these areas, all the way up to near Glasgow, Montana, and Wolf Point, Montana, and Rapid City, South Dakota, all in that enhanced risk of very large hail. Large hail in the hail capital of the world, as we talked about in my last video, but you can see here that we have that risk in extending into the sands area of parts of western Nebraska as well as western Kansas, in the high plains. So the risk of severe weather is greatest in the western Dakotas down into the western parts of Nebraska and Kansas and extreme eastern Colorado and Wyoming and the high plains of the big sky country of Montana. And that's the way it looks right now. Again, my name is Hutch Johnson, a meteorologist of 27 years. I appreciate your likes on these videos if you like what you saw here. I appreciate your comments below. I love a two-way conversation. So make sure you let me know where you're watching from. And again, if you're so inclined, please hit the subscribe button if you like to see more of my content right here. And speaking of which, if you look over to the side here and click on it, you can see a little bit more about Hutch and some of the fun I like to have when I'm not talking about the weather. Have a great night. I'll be on as we go through the event on Thursday to let you know what's happening, where it's happening, and just how bad it is.